My name is Colin Radix-Carter. I'm an early childhood educator at Mann Elementary School in Washington, D.C. I've taught, this is my 6th year teaching at the school, but I've been in the field now for just about 20 years.
Okay.
And I'm Gabrielle DuBose. I teach at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Currently, I'm running the Writing Center and also teaching a course to freshman students on the history of go-go music and the history of Duke Ellington, the school. I've been teaching for 30 years.
Okay.
Jeff Johnson, also at Duke Ellington School of the Arts. I'm a social studies teacher there, 9th and 10th grade, and I've been there for 6 years and overall about 20 years in education.
Okay. And Jeff, we'll start with you. What is it that made you want to get into teaching as a profession?
At first, it was not the first career track that I had in mind, but I had an opportunity to get into the field working in Cleveland through a program called the Positive Education Program, working with young people at severe behavioral handicaps. And long and the short of it just puts you in pretty close contact with what the kids are really going through and trying to solve their actual problems and give them the real supports they need. And that's kind of what has stuck me in the career for as long as I've been in it.
And what is it that inspired you to get into teaching?
Well, at the time, I was working corporate and was on maternity leave, and an option was presented to me to teach at a small Christian school in PG County, Great Commission Christian Academy, and I said yes to that, and I have never looked back, just interacting with the young people. I've taught children from 3 years old to high school, and it's a huge blessing and benefit to interact with them and be an educator with those kids.
And Colin, what about you?
I think I'm one of the few people who actually had the idea of going into teaching. I had the idea from high school, just having parents who, my mother was a nurse, my dad is an entrepreneur, but they've always emphasized the idea of serving the community, and then not many male teachers. So just having the idea of from high school that having the idea of going into teaching, but out of college, being put into early childhood, just from experience that I had the opportunity to do. And I actually tried to get out of the field for the first 10 years. And then after 10 years, it just came apparent that this was probably a calling. So instead of running away from early childhood, it was something that I think around 2013 I embraced, and I just fully stepped into the role of being an early childhood educator.
And talk about that a little bit, because it is no doubt a tough profession. You said you were trying to get out of it. What is it that brings you back and keeps you, in the classroom?
I think for me, just having the understanding that at this age, it's the idea of making or breaking their experience moving forward. So the ideal for me is when they get to you, as in high school, that they have a joy of learning and that they have that curiosity of learning the issues that are apparent in our world, but making learning applicable to them in terms of what I was given, I think especially from my parents, the idea of using your education for the betterment of people. And so working with young kids is very easy to do that because everything is just so new, and in a lot of ways they keep me young, but they also keep me on my toes in terms of like what they say and how they respond to things. But at the same time, it gives me the unique opportunity to kind of, it's not just about teaching, it's about teaching them about life and what they need to do in order to be a good student, but also, more importantly for me, how to enjoy learning, not just in the early grades, but hopefully throughout their lives.
Yeah. And 30 years in the classroom, what is it that keeps pulling you back?
Well, like Colin, for me it's a calling to be engaged and involved with students in the classroom. Teaching at the high school level, as you can imagine, has a lot of challenges, especially in this particular day and time. But the call is very great for me, and I take it personally, to be involved with these students and offering hope to them in the midst of the challenges that are existing in our city, in our nation, and in our world. And so for me to be able to continue to urge them forward, to engage in education, embrace it, and invest in themselves, because once you're involved in your education, you own that. No one can take that from you. And it does help with identity, and that's critically important to me, especially in this particular time that we're dealing with in our world.
Yeah, and for you?
I think, you know, for me, it is the opportunity to connect with young folks and to help them navigate a very complicated reality that is much more in their face than it was for me when I came up. I also was surrounded by a lot of love and a lot of support and a lot of privilege, if I'm being completely honest. And the older I get and the more I work with young folks, and the more I get to know people at all, you see how much a lot of people never got that in their lives at all.
Yeah.
And so I've had a lot of feedback from students over the years that it wasn't just the lessons in class, you know, about history that really counted. It was really my coaching them through some difficult moments. I can think of all kinds of traumatic stuff that these kids have gone through, and it's I think a lot of adults don't really take seriously that these kids are going through bigger adult problems than most of the adults, you know, and they're just kids and they don't have the power to actually deal with it the way that we can. So
how do you handle that as a teacher, right? Because you are having to battle something that, you know, in some other places, other teachers don't have to deal with, that you are dealing with real issues, students who come in with a lot on their plate before you even get to teaching them. So how do you handle that on a daily basis?
I try to take deep breaths. I try to get enough sleep at night, but I also spend a lot of time listening. And I think that is one key thing as I've gotten older, not seeing people really do with each other very much. Mm-hmm. We have to spend a lot of time not worried about what we want the kid to become and more time spending just understanding who that kid is. And we're on a path with them, trying to guide them to themselves. We're not trying to guide them to what we want them to become. So it's, you know, you're going to take the joy and pain with that. So for all of the pain and suffering that I've probably endured with, that we've all endured with these students, there has been a tremendous amount of joy on the other side of that. So
there are not a lot of black male teachers in the classroom. Why is it important for you guys to be there? And is that part of the reason that you feel like that is your calling, that you need to keep coming back year after year?
I think that's part of it for me. It's the idea that I'm very unique in terms of, you know, being a black educator who's male, who's in early childhood. That speaks a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I understand my role in terms of, and my responsibility at this point. It's really not about me, but it's about, in certain ways, the representation of having the idea of seeing someone like me in the classroom. For many of my students, this may be the only opportunity that they have to have someone like me as part of their lives. So I want to make sure that if I'm the only black male teacher that they have, that they think of me as, you know, someone who cared, but someone who challenged them to be beyond themselves. But I think also, in a lot of ways, it's, I think, speaking to a larger call for the need of male teachers who are of color in a classroom. And there are many issues as to why, for many black men, this isn't a viable option for them. Mm-hmm. And so that has to be addressed in terms of part of the issues that stem from the way our education system is set up, and how can we make this this really occupation viable for all teachers, but especially for men of color.
That's a heavy weight to carry. That
it is. You
may only, or be the only male role model in someone's life.
Right.
How do you carry that?
I think for me personally, I think I've grown into the field now that to understand, don't take everything so personally, that my role is not to be a savior to all. I think the reality is you cannot be, but just do the best you can within the context that I have control over. What I have control is in my classroom. So I can fully control what happens there, and then what happens as an extension of that is only the icing of the cake for me, but just kind of understanding my limits in terms of my mental health and making sure I need to do So if I need to step away to give myself the opportunity for me to do that, but giving the understanding that it shouldn't just fall on me. But I'm hoping in terms of me being part of the field that it gives more of a call to the powers that be to recognize that this, along with other issues, need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff?
For sure, I'm aware of what being a black male in this career profession means. I know what it means to a lot of the kids because what they've told me. I've had students say everything from, you know, you taught me to be a better person to you saved my life, and I don't even know what that particular student meant by that, but these are mostly black students. And I think that in a culture that has traditionally kept black men in kept this idea of us being very aggressive and very one-dimensional, very anti-intellectual, almost animalistic, for all of these kids, regardless of their color, to be in the care of a black male teacher, and literally the care of, where you are listening to them, you're remembering the things that they have endured, you know, and often showing up for it. I think that that is an extremely powerful thing, especially given the rhetoric around this idea that we don't take care of our own children or that we don't look out for our own community. And I even have to push back against that when I hear other black men say it, because I'm like, you all just aren't looking for those of us who are doing the work. And for sure, I feel the same burden I'm sure that all of us face and Colin faces specifically for being another black male teacher. And it is a tremendous weight to carry every single day, for sure. And you are just trying to do the best on your little piece of the earth that you can, but you do recognize that there is this behemoth that is before you, because it's before these kids. And again, they don't have the power to deal with it. So I think it's really, really it's a very strengthening thing for them and for myself, that when they're going through things, that my cultural understanding is going to help them to be able to interpret and navigate. That is a very meaningful thing for me.
Yes, yes, yes.
So obviously we are, you know, talking about Teacher Appreciation Week. You all deserve to be spotlighted, not just during this week, but the entire year, 24/7. What is it that you really need? What would make you truly feel appreciated?
Well, interestingly, there is a bill before City Council that Rob White's office has written, and it has to deal with teacher retention. And so if you think about teacher retention as the umbrella in terms of what teachers are saying are the solutions that will keep us in this profession that we feel called to, teachers need to have access to mental health wellness opportunities within our schoolhouse. You need to have opportunity for flexible scheduling, all these kinds of things that will ease some of the stress and pressure that teachers are experiencing in the classroom as we're navigating through with our students and the traumatic situations that they experience. And as Jeff and Colin have both said, it's more than just teaching the curriculum, it's also helping these kids to navigate through life, helping to shape their young minds. And so with that said, the teachers, who are the first point of contact for these students in the classroom, we need to have access to our own mental health wellness as well. And things like flexibility within our schedules, within our timing, in the schoolhouse, things like teacher-led professional development opportunities. These are the types of solutions that helps to keep us in the game, so to speak, that helps to keep us within the calling that we are experiencing. Yeah.
Jeff?
I'm gonna, because my colleague here gave a lot of the very practical stuff out there, I'm going to put some more, I think, ideological or cultural shifts that I think need to happen. I think we don't really prioritize young people. And we have a tendency to look down on them and just kind of treat them as just subjects of whatever our will is. And I think that if people would take a step back and kind of look at it and say, if we're taking care of young people, we will be taking care of these teachers. If we take care of the teachers, we will take care of these young people. If it's not coming from a genuine place of care and concern for the welfare of everybody involved, then even the measures that we take may end up falling short because they won't get enforced properly, or there won't be the same care and concern over that stuff. You know, so because I worry about things like, are the kids getting fed properly? You know, when I see a lot of the things, a lot of the curriculum being attacked in a lot of schools and a lot of options for young people that are being taken away in all these states, and I'm like, if you really cared about the kids, you'd be worried about feeding them first and foremost. How do we have $19.1 million of school lunch debt in this country? So it's a bigger ask, but I feel like it is a necessary ask at a time when we are becoming, I think, dangerously nihilistic in this country, and these kids cannot bear the brunt of our failure if that's the direction that we're going in.
Colin?
Jeff and Gabrielle said it well, and I think the biggest thing for me is having teachers' voices heard in among the voices that they should be the ones who are represented and making the calls in terms of what they see, in terms of what they believe is best for their students, in terms of what their communities need, what their schools need, and and by association with that, what their parents, their families in their schools are looking for. I feel very privileged to be able to be at a school now for, this is approaching my 7th year, where I do have a lot of autonomy and say in terms of what the curriculum should be, in terms of knowing my kids. And my only regret in a lot of ways is that I know across the river there are other teachers who do not have that same privilege. And so for me, the idea that I've been able to be at my school for this long, where I've known students teaching currently when they were babies. And that's such a delight to be able to kind of say that I have that partnership with families now. And my wish, and I think that's kind of why I'm in the field, is to have a place where all teachers, regardless of whatever school that they're at, feel that same type of peace, but also having that same feeling that my voice matters in terms of what my students are learning. My voice matters in terms of uplifting the voices of the children that they represent and the families that they represent, to be able to kind of challenge the establishment and say, these are the things that what our families and our students are asking for, and we need to do what we can to ensure that their voices are heard. So I think for me, it's the idea of having teachers feel whatever school that they're at, that they're able to make that kind of investment long term, instead of being run out due to issues, the underlying issues that have existed in this country for decades. And I think the pandemic has exacerbated a lot of those issues, and I'm glad that they're being spoken to a lot more. But we need to continue those conversations in a more direct way, in having those teachers' voices being represented in those discussions.
And a lot of what you guys brought up, obviously, this is geared toward lawmakers, people who are decision makers when it comes to what happens in the schools. What about parents? What about the community? What is it that, people who may be watching, what can they do to help support teachers?
Well, one of the things that the community can do is to urge us, along with City Council, to pass the teacher retention bill, because again, under that particular bill is where teachers can access wellness for ourselves. When teachers can access wellness, I can go into the classroom more authentically as my whole self, and that's going to translate and transfer over to those students, so that I then have the capacity to sit down with them and chat with them, to be that ear that they need me to be as they're walking through challenging situations themselves. And so as a community can rally behind us and urge City Council to legislate things like teacher wellness and flexible scheduling for schools, so that schools have the power to be flexible with our schedules over the course of the school day, so that we can have more concentrated time and small group time with the students, etc., to be that additional arm that our students desperately need in these particular times that we're living in.
I think it's to remember that we're all on the same side here. That all of our collective goal is the success of young people, and we just all have to come to the table and kind of list out what are the items on that list for what success looks like for these kids, and just ensuring that whatever we're doing isn't adversarial with each other. We need our parent support for sure. And we're fortunate because at least in our community, I know with a lot of our parents, one phone call or one email home, and whatever it was that I needed addressed is addressed, very quickly, and they're usually very, very encouraging and supportive of us, and it does make a huge bit of difference. And I'm reminded of by what Colin said about wishing that other teachers could have the experience of feeling appreciated or respected. Like, yes. I do get that sense from where we are and from our parents. And it is something that helps me to come back every single day, despite how, I mean, I love what I do and it is full of joy, but it is extremely stressful what we do. So those are all things that I think, and I know I keep asking people to have an attitude shift. I can't help it. I started off in behavior, and I just can't help but see it as something that starts in our minds.
Right.
I mean, yes,
Absolutely.
we definitely got to get the legislation passed,
Yes.
but it has to be a mind-setting change and if we can't tell from everything we're seeing happening in the country, we need to change some things.
Well, even to get the legislation going, a mindset change has to happen. So that it's all cyclical and it's all connected.
Right, right.
I think for families, just one, listening to teachers and what they need. And I think generally families understand what teachers are going through. But I think on a larger scale is the idea of supporting teachers in terms of what they need. And I don't want to kind of limit the conversation as far as pay, because I think pay is important, but that's not the thing that's going to make teachers stay. Right. I think, as we shared, there's a lot of issues as far as autonomy in the classroom, making sure infrastructure is better for in all schools, ensuring that teachers are having the care as far as mental wellness, flexible scheduling that they need, tailoring curriculum to the needs of their students. There's a lot that goes into this craft. And so I think for teachers and families, there's been a lot of direct action in more recent years of teachers and families working in solidarity together to demand more from our legislators in terms of what they need and being willing to strike in order to get what they need. So that's kind of my challenge, for families to, because a lot of families, especially in DC, have a lot of influence, and collectively, if we're able to unite in solidarity with teachers, we'll be able to have a lot more wins in terms of how can we best serve the schools that we're looking to invest in.
There is nothing in the world that can be compared to being an educator and interacting with young people who you see later on in life, and they thank you. It's a very stressful job. Some have said it's a thankless job, but I don't agree with that. There's a lot of thanks that happens that we experience on the one-to-one with our students on a regular basis and our families. And so I wouldn't trade being an educator for the world. Stressful, yes, but essential to life. There isn't a person on the planet that hasn't had teachers to impact their lives. And so it's a high calling, and it's a great calling.